You're listening to the Youth for Life podcast with Michelle Baum, Director of Y for Life at Lutherans for Life, where we prepare youth to be gospel-motivated voices for life. Be sure to stick around after today's live recording of our Chats for Life program to find out how you can be live too on our next Youth for Life podcast. Welcome again. We do have 6 expert speakers tonight, so you guys are going to really get an earful and lots of great ideas. And I know some of you are headed off to other Concordias, so you can make some connections, which is super exciting. So I'm going to jump right into being for life in college. And the first thing we want to talk about is how to be for life at maybe those Concordias or Christian campuses, Lutheran campuses in particular. So I'm going to hand it over to Bonnie and Olivia. You guys are up.
All right. So our first point that we had on being for life specifically at Concordias, we had said temptation to sit on the side and let others speak or to have a lukewarm stance is often a problem on Concordia campuses specifically. I've definitely seen the lukewarm stance before. Just to give some examples, like if there's people that are like more libertarian in their politics, I've seen more of an emphasis on economic importance in their politics so like they prioritize economics or politics rather than life issues or abortion specifically, because often with like libertarian candidates, they are pro-choice. So I've seen that on our campus before where people have kind of a lukewarm stance in that sense. I've seen men on campus uncomfortable with taking a clear stance on abortion because they don't think that they should have a say or as much of a say as women. And yeah, this does even take place on Concordia campuses. I've also seen people afraid to confront controversy, which contributes to the lukewarm stance. And then with the temptation to sit on the sidelines, that's sort of related to our next point, which is a false assumption that everyone is already pro-life, so you don't have to be as active because other people are already doing it. While it is a pretty accurate assumption that at a Concordia, there are going to be more pro-life conservative people because you're at a small Christian campus, there are always those pro-choice people. And I can think of classmates that I've had who are very liberal, left-leaning on their politics, not just related to economics, but on the abortion issue too. We even have a professor on our campus that is not pro-life. So there are those people even on Concordia campuses. So it is a false assumption to think that everyone is just automatically pro-life because you're on a conservative Christian campus. There is some truth in the assumption that there will be more people that are pro-life. Even though that's true, that's not a reason to not be involved in the pro-life movement. The more the merrier. The more people that are involved in your life group, it's going to encourage more people to be pro-life on your campus, to be active in their communities, and you're going to have more people that are serving in that area. And then our next point was on culture at Concordias. There's a tendency to get along and avoid uncomfortable views / conversation. So yeah, I've definitely observed this on our campus. I think going back to that assumption that everyone already has sort of a like-mindedness, we're used to all having mostly the same beliefs. Like even if we're not all Lutheran, most people are some sort of conservative Christian. And so when you do get into topics where there might be disagreement, that can be foreign sometimes and uncomfortable for people but it's important to confront that controversy. And then we didn't have this on our notes, but one positive reason that I wanted to give for supporting life, especially on your Concordia campus, and I guess this really relates to any college campus, this is especially a time where you have ample opportunity to get involved in the pro-life movement. I've had more opportunity now in college than I've ever had, not just events like the March for Life and different conferences, but it's easier to find people your age that are for life to go and do things like pray in front of Planned Parenthood for 40 Days for Life, or to make tie blankets for your crisis pregnancy center, or whatever it may be that you're, however, in what way you want to help in the pro-life movement. This is a very good time to get involved because there are so many opportunities. So I just wanted to add that positive reason for being involved in the For Life movement.
Thank you. I want to jump in before Bonnie goes on with the rest of that point, and that is just real quick, how many of you see that on college campus or on high school campus where you're on a Lutheran campus, but you don't have a like-mindedness with everyone on campus? I mean, have you seen that? Yeah. And was that surprising? Yes, sometimes, yes, a little bit, no. So, okay. All right. So yeah, I think it's really important to point that out, like Olivia said, that just because we're all on the same Lutheran campus doesn't mean that we're all going to have the same view of life issues and how to address them, right? Yeah, that's great. All right, Bonnie. And by the way, real quick, Olivia, tell us what school you go to, okay? And maybe
yeah. I'm at Concordia, Nebraska. Probably should have mentioned that before.
It's all right. It's all right. Okay, go ahead, Bonnie.
So I'm Bonnie. I am a leader of the Students for Life group at Concordia, Wisconsin. And so, yeah, Olivia kind of talked about some bad reasons to not be active in the pro-life movement. And then just sort of to pick up off of that point that she added about you have like ample opportunity, you also kind of have ample time like you never had before. So the fact of the matter is, on your campus, like there are still life issues to address. And even though I think our culture kind of paints college as a time where, well, first of all, where you should just be like out partying and, doing whatever, living it up, but also just like a time to focus on yourself and your career and kind of looking at yourself and figure out what life is supposed to be for you. And there's some truth in that. Of course, you're going to college to get an education and kind of figure out what you're doing with your life. But that doesn't mean that the greater issues in the world just kind of stop or go away while you're in college. And really, that those 4 years are a time that's very critical for you to kind of get grounded in the kind of person that you're going to be, not just the kind of job that you're going to have. So like my parents would always tell me in high school that college should be the start of your adulthood. And they would say, like, some people see it as just sort of like the end of their childhood, but they would encourage me to see it as the start of my being an adult. And what I've noticed, so I tried my best. But what I noticed that is true in that is that you are forming habits that you're going to take with you for the rest of your adult life, because for most people, it's the first time that they're independent on their own. So you kind of figure out how to do it. Like, what kinds of things do I do? How do I run my day? For the first time in your life, you're doing it all on your own. And so those habits that you build now in college are going to be the groundwork for what you do for the rest of your life. So one example I think that's different is like church attendance. So you may have been going to church all your life because your parents take you every Sunday. But then when you get to college, and this happens for a lot of people, like you get to college and no one's forcing you to go, and it's on you to find a ride or wake up early on your own and go. So you might find yourself not going as often. And that kind of is a clear indicator that church is not as important to you as some other things in your life, whether that's homework or sleep or friends or whatever. But the fact of the matter is that it should be more important to you. And so at some point, people will make an adjustment and then, say, you know what, actually, I know this is a priority in my life. And so I'm going to act like it is a priority until it is a habit and something that I do every week. So if you start attending church regularly now, when you're first forming your habits as an independent person, an individual who does things on their own, that will lead you to attend church regularly once you graduate and move on and your life gets busier. And you're just like, well, I go to church every week, so I'm just going to do that. And obviously, church is different than pro-life activism. Like, I'm not saying those are equivalent. And there are, of course, other ways to serve than in the pro-life ministry. But my point is just that the habits that you form as a college student will be your basis for the rest of your adult life in a lot of ways. So if life issues are really important to you, like church attendance probably is, and I can guess since you're at Chats for Life that life issues are important to you, then you should make a habit of prioritizing them at the time when it's most critical to. And I think that college is that most critical time because it's the first time you're away from your parents and you're forming your habits for how you're going to live the rest of your life. And then, I mean, like I was saying earlier, the life issues are still there. And even on a Christian and a Lutheran campus, you don't have to go out of your way to sort of like engage life issues. And the most obvious one for us on a college campus is the issue of abortion. And I just looked up some statistics from the CDC, and 58% of abortions are by women in their 20s in 2018. So if you compare that to women in their 30s, they account for 30% of abortions. So 58% is a really high percentage of abortions to be in one age group. And Lutheran campuses are not immune to that. There are women who get pregnant. I don't know the number, but I'm sure there are women on Concordia, Wisconsin's campus who have gone through an abortion. So it's really important that we're vocal because the issues aren't out there only, they're also on our campuses. And then particularly at like a Christian Lutheran school, it's really important to not only just be vocal about abortion, but also we have the opportunity to connect that to the love of the gospel so that we aren't just shouting at women to keep their babies, but showing them that we love them and we love their baby and Christ loves them and their baby and that they aren't alone going through it. So those are all some good reasons to be for life on campus.
Are there any questions? Do you guys have any questions so far about, what life is like on Concordia campuses or Lutheran campuses or for life ministry? Okay. Yeah, Jenna, go ahead.
Are you finding it helpful to be kind of having discussions, like sort of debates with people who you think might be pro-choice, like philosophy-wise, talking about that, or have you mostly been focusing on just ministry type engagement?
Good question.
So I wouldn't approach it as necessarily like ministry or debate. How I usually approach conversations on campus is civil discussion. So I'm not trying to win an argument. I'm just trying to have a calm discussion where I'll listen to their side and then I'll also respectfully tell them why I am pro-life. And it's usually been very productive as long as you're not coming at it in a hostile way. Even if you don't totally like get them to come to your side, it at least gives them a perspective that they probably haven't considered before.
So you think it's pretty productive when you're having like discussions like that and stuff with people? Because sometimes, I find it can be really good to have those discussions, and other times I feel like it's not going anywhere. So I just like don't talk about it a lot.
Yeah, and I think you just have to kind of take it in a case-by-case basis. Like you can usually tell if someone actually wants to hear what you're saying and have a productive discussion, or if they're just there to shout you down and shout their opinion and, not listen to you.
Anyone else want to jump in?
Sorry, I was just going to address one more thing about the ministry side. Like, you can also have it be a ministry thing. Like, you can incorporate the gospel in your discussion too. So it doesn't need to be like an either or type of thing. You can do all of the above.
Certainly our actions, our gospel motivated voice is important, but so are our gospel motivated actions, right? And so you'll be a witness either way, but it's important to be able to speak, right? It's important to be able to know how to have the conversation. So, and I think Katie's going to maybe get into some of that too. So we'll hand it over to her and go ahead.
Okay, my name is Katie. I am a freshman at Hillsdale College, which is not technically It is Christian. It recently became Christian affiliated, but not with any certain denomination. So there are a lot of religious people here, very religious people, but you can't assume it. And that's something I want to echo from what Olivia said, is that when you're talking about issues about life, you can't always come at it from a religious perspective. And that's one thing that is especially true at Hillsdale, that I've met many religious people, but we are also a very politically driven campus. Everyone has an opinion on something, and everyone is talking about it, discussing it. I mean, all throughout class, even after class, I've been in the classroom like 20 minutes after a class several times, just talking about issues. And especially in a situation when you can't assume they're religious, it's important to still affirm the sanctity of life. So when you're talking about political issues, abortion is the biggest one. You can emphasize the sanctity of life, if not always from a religious perspective, or when it comes to the death penalty, immigration, all these life issues that we talk about. It's important that when you talk about the economics, like Olivia said also, when you talk about the economics, when you talk about the political side, it's important to remind them that, hey, these are humans, these are lives that we need to protect. And that's probably the best thing you can do when you can't always assume religion, is that you emphasize the sanctity of human life, emphasize that there are people who need to be helped, people who need to be saved. And when you feel the time is right, yeah, you can, it's very important to bring in gospel, but you can't always assume that. And that's also one of the most important things at a secular campus is conversation. I mean, we talked about that earlier, that it's not necessarily debate, it's not necessarily mission work, it's just conversations. Sometimes the most important thing is to get to know someone rather than to get your point fully across, because if you form that relationship, you know that maybe later you can say that thing you forgot to say, you can bring home that argument that you might have started and they might have been thinking about and having opposition to. It's important to form relationships more than it is to win. It's not really about winning. And that's one thing I've learned in college, is that most discussions, most debates aren't even won in the moment. They're won in the moments that the person you were talking to is alone with their thoughts and saying, hey, they may have had some very good points that I don't really have an answer to. So that conversation is important. Those relationships are important. And kind of going back to what Bonnie said, creating those habits of respect, of love, of showing love for the people you're talking to, but also the people that the issues are about. It's a lot about building up your character. Like every little habit, every action you take will affect your habits in the future. And this is a very critical time for you to be building those habits, to be centering them on life and on the gospel. And then even if your team isn't gospel motivated, you can be personally gospel motivated. And that will help you kind of, I'm Lutheran, so I'm very liturgical in my faith. I love going to church. I love the community of faith, but I'm also very individual about it. And that's something that really helps me at a non-Lutheran school, is that I am very strong in my personal faith, but that doesn't mean it has to be only in a Lutheran setting. And that's something you can bring to a team that isn't necessarily gospel motivated, is that I am very gospel motivated. I see life as something that needs to be protected as my brothers and sisters of Christ, but I can do it in ways that aren't necessarily religious. Yeah. And also, sorry, one more thing is making sure that your actions kind of reflect what your words are saying. Is that if you are personally gospel motivated, and if you're going to bring the gospel into your arguments or present them through your virtues, you have to reflect those in your actions, or else people might not think that your virtues, what you believe in, are really accurate or applicable to their lives.
Yeah, to kind of put it into terms that LFL uses, LFL often uses, or Y for Life often uses, the point of the conversation is to win the person, not the argument. And in winning the person, again, it opens up doors for further conversations, right? Just winning the argument, actually, you lose big time, right? That's a loss, because the whole point of life ministry and interacting with people for life is really about caring about people. And that's why the issues are important, because every issue is really about people, right? And their lives. So yeah, that's a great observation, great question, and thank you, Katie. So now we're moving on to Caroline. She's going to talk to us about what do you do with secular colleges, right? Not even Christian.
I'm Caroline. I go to Concordia, Wisconsin, so actually not a secular college. So this isn't something that I have personal experience with, but I think it's important to talk about too. So when you're at a secular college, obviously there's going to be a lot of different beliefs and views. And so like you might be one of your only friends who is pro-life. So you could be, that light in a dark place. And so kind of like what Katie talked about, you can't assume that everyone is religious. So you may not, when talking to other people about being pro-life, you may not be able to use religious arguments and that kind of thing. So you have the opportunity to really talk about being pro-life in more of like a logical way too. Not that like, obviously the religious arguments aren't logical, but just thinking about it from a different point of view. And there's life issues everywhere. So obviously there's going to be a lot of life issues on these college campuses, and there are lives at stake. So it's really important for you to advocate for life in every possible way. Other things that we kind of talked about are like, it's really important to find a good church home. So if you're at that secular college, that way you can still be feeding your faith, and that can really help you as being pro-life too. So a good recommendation is definitely to find a church, and sometimes churches have pro-life groups too that you can be involved with. It would also be really good to find friends, whether they're pro-life or not, that you could volunteer with. And so if you could find like pregnancy resource centers or pregnant or crisis pregnancy homes, like places that you can volunteer, that's a really good way to advocate for life and to work with people that way.
Great, thank you, Caroline. What questions do you guys have for Caroline or Katie? Go ahead, Jenna.
I'm still really interested to hear what your thoughts would be about, talking with people about kind of like defending the pro-life viewpoint from whichever way you prefer to do that. Because especially in secular universities, I feel like that would be a really hard place to do it, especially lately. So I'm hearing a lot about making sure you have a community at church or like a volunteer place outside, so that you're not constantly feeling like you're the only person with a brain or anything like that. But how do you think the best way would be to talk to people who are seriously probably even anti people who are pro-life, just because of how strongly they feel about it? And when you're in classes and stuff with professors that are very focused on a specific agenda that they might have about what they think about pro-life or abortion or stuff, how can you stay true to your beliefs while being in that type of class or whatever? Sorry, that was like a whole lot, but
no, those are great questions, Jenna. And I'm gonna just open it up to the field. I have some ideas, but I want my college students to jump in if they have ideas first, okay? So
I can go ahead and jump in unless Katie's super passionate about this. Katie, do you want to talk?
Yeah, sorry. So I have a lot of experience with this, given that I'm not necessarily, we're all very religious at Hillsdale, but a lot of what we talk about is very political, very more the logical, the philosophical views. And especially when you're coming at someone who is basically anti-pro-life, which is a lot more word. But one of the most important things to remember in a discussion about abortion specifically is that it is a very emotional issue. It's a very emotional issue. A lot of hostility can be brought up because you have to think about the other side. You have to think about, if you don't understand or comprehend that abortion is ending a life, it could be scary to you to think that someone is trying to tell you what to do with what you believe to be your body, what you believe to be your rights of reproductive, any of that. It can be terrifying, especially if you're not religious and you feel like it's only, if people are only coming at it from a religious view, then why is the church telling me what to do with my legal rights? It can be very terrifying to the other side. And what you want to do is you want to try and lead them to understand the main point is with abortion. Sorry, my school, a lot of my pro-life experience is mainly in the argument against abortion. So that's just where I come from. But what you want to start with is defining why you are so, I've been asked several times, why do you care so much about this? Why are you so passionate about this? And you have to start from the standpoint that abortion is the intentional killing of a human life, and that you have to explain that to them. But another very, very important thing is to not really let the other side get too emotional, because in a discussion, it's supposed to be very logical, very civil, and any hostility, any emotion can cloud your judgment and really frustrate you. Like, have you ever been in a conversation with someone and you can't get your words out because you're so frustrated, and then it just makes you even more frustrated, and then like you just resort to little arguments, maybe even yelling at the person you're talking to. You just don't want to bring emotion into it. You don't want to argue from it from a very, very personal view. You want to stick to logical arguments and a lot of scientific facts, logical facts, religious facts, especially if you're talking to someone who is religious and is pro-choice. You gotta have the logical religious arguments and not just go straight to emotion.
I think also going off of that, like Katie said, wanting to be clear about why you believe what you believe, but then also being willing to hear what they have to say about their core of their beliefs, just to find out what the fundamental difference is between what you believe and what they believe, so you can actually work to address those. So like Katie said, if they don't believe that life actually begins at fertilization, well, then you have a very fundamental belief that you have a disconnect there. And so you need to discuss why they believe that. Well, the science shows that life does begin at fertilization. So how can you show them that? And so like Katie also said, keeping it very level-headed throughout the conversation. We talked about de-escalation at the Wife for Life leadership retreat. So like Katie said, keeping your voice calm, making it a private conversation, because like Katie also said, a lot of times these people are anti-pro-life more than anything else. And so they want to get a reaction out of you. They want to prove that you're wrong and all these other things that aren't necessarily logical parts of their argument, but rather emotional aspects of their argument. So by maintaining a level head, you strip them of that and you're able to have a real conversation with them on a one-on-one basis, where you're able to not only share what you believe, but respectfully hear what they believe, and then have a discussion and see, where are they wrong, where you may be having a misconception about what they believe, and finding common ground to have a real conversation in civil discourse.
It's important also to remember the position, right? So for example, you mentioned your professor, right? So if your professor says something in class and you disagree, of course, it's okay. It's very okay to ask the question, why do you say that? Or could it be this? Or, I've always thought the way that we interact with people, the way that we come at the situation is pretty important. So asking or just saying you're wrong, obviously that's not a good start to a conversation, right? And very often those conversations are best had one-on-one. Now, in a classroom setting, you may be given the opportunity to speak the truth in love, right? And to make a good confession. And sometimes that is very important, especially at a state university, because maybe that's an opportunity for God to work through you, as Caroline said, to be a light in a very dark place. But how you go about it is just as important as what you're saying, right? Because if you're just going to go about it in a way that's going to build a wall, again, it goes back to winning an argument rather than the person, and we want to win the person. There are some really, there's some great materials out there. And if you attend Chats for Life this summer, Jenna, which I hope you do, we're going to be going through some of those pro-life apologetics. What are some arguments you can make, or what are some facts? So it's good. Right now, you are building you are building all that information, all those facts. You're just building a library in your head of things that you know to be true, right? And you'll be able to pull from that. But also we're going to be doing some practicing this summer as to how to talk, how to speak the truth in love. And so, and that takes some time, right? And again, it's probably best done one-on-one. So, like techniques like sitting down rather than towering over someone, leaning back rather than leaning into someone that's very aggressive. So there's even some nonverbals that you can do. And again, this summer, I hope to share with you some of my experiences in going to a public university for my master's program, in which I was in a classroom where the professor was definitely not just anti-life, but anti-Christian, and was very forceful in that. And there are ways that you can respectfully disagree and still be a light. It's a great question, Jenna. Other comments, other suggestions?
I was going to mention, I think Bonnie's going to talk about this later, but at Concordia this year, we did the Equal Rights Institute training course. And I think that's something that's really helpful too. They talk about a lot of strategies for talking to people who are pro-choice. So if that's something you're interested, I would definitely recommend that you look into that. I think it's super helpful.
And we're going to use some of that this summer because we have permission to do that. So you're going to get it if you come back. Okay. Let's take a look at how to be for life on a college campus then, just in general. Jesse and Nicole, if you want to lead us off.
Yeah, so I'll actually be taking the lead on this one, and Nicole's going to take our other half. But my name's Jesse, and I'm one of the co-leaders of CUC for Life, so on the campus of Concordia University, Chicago. And so actually just a great segue from that conversation, one of the greatest ways that you can be pro-life on a college campus is, speaking your mind in class and holding tight to that truth that you know that you have. And believe it or not, I actually had an opportunity to engage in this discussion today during one of my classes. And we actually had a discussion about life issues in one of my English literature classes. And we were reading A Streetcar Named Desire by Tennessee Williams. And if you've never read that play, one of the most climactic scenes towards the end of the play, a rape happens. And that is a life issue. And so we had this whole conversation about the dehumanization of individuals. And we talked about rape and sexual assault, pornography, and I know that my professor is Christian. She's not Lutheran though, so we do disagree on a couple things, and I know for a fact that there are people in this class who are not pro-life, but I was able to maintain the conversation to be very all-encompassing of life issues by first, the starting point was this idea of rape being a life issue, and obviously you're not going to find anyone with a sane mind who says that rape is okay. And so that was a great starting point for, opening up this conversation of valuing all life. And I was actually able to push the conversation all the way to what I would call the modern day genocide against people with Down syndrome. And that was a conversation that we were able to get all the way there as far as addressing the fact that those individuals have life too. And we talked about individuals with disabilities. And so all of this was brought up, and we had this great conversation in class where we basically just posed the question of how do we define these people as anything other than human? Because first and foremost, they are human. So that was a really cool experience for me because, even on a Concordia campus, I don't always get the opportunity to do that, but I saw my opportunity and I took it this morning and it felt really great. But, and obviously there are going to be people who want to poke holes and want to say, well, you're not really, for life. But when you take that holistic, everyone deserves to live approach and everyone's life has value, you're going to find that it's a lot harder for people to try and poke those holes, because loving everyone is something that's really hard to disagree with. People will find a way, but it's a lot harder. And that's the beauty of the Why for Life approach and the Lutherans for Life approach with the gospel motivated aspect, is that you can fully and truthfully say that you are for life in all stages, places, and contexts. It doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter what abilities you have or what your circumstances are. Your life has value because God created you and you've been redeemed by Christ through his death and resurrection. So there's a lot going for you as far as, this is a very loving argument that you're able to bring up. So you should be able to do that confidently. Obviously, that's not going to be for everyone, and you're not always going to have that easy connection. So some of the other ways that we talked about how to be for life on a college campus includes, first of all, finding out if there is a club. Like the three Concordias that are represented here in Hillsdale all have life groups of their own. And so, three of us are Y for Life teams, and then Hillsdale's is a pro-life team that's not associated with Y for Life, but it's still an opportunity to engage in for life work. So find out if there's a club. Almost all schools will have like a co-curricular fair or extracurricular fair where you can go and see all the different clubs. Just take a walk around to see if there's a life group on campus. And that's a great way to plug in and just find ways to actually do for life activities. Beyond that, if you're able to find that club, find a mentor, a friend, or a leader of that group and just really get to know them. One of my favorite parts of being one of the co-leaders of CUC for Life is when I get a text or someone stops me on the sidewalk and they ask me a life question. I had someone text me like, hey, what do you know about vaccines? And, I sent them some resources, and it was a really great conversation. And just being able to build those relationships with people. Obviously, I'm on the other end of that as an upperclassman and as already being in a leadership position. But, as a leader, I can say I would love to get to know any of you and have those life conversations and answer those questions for you from my perspective as being part of this ministry for a while now. Caroline mentioned finding a church is another great way to make connections. So maybe you don't have a life group on campus, but you go to church and you find people who also go to your school that go to that church. And odds are if they're going to a Lutheran church, they're going to be fairly for life. And so that's a great place to start with finding people who are going to go do for life activities with you. And maybe that's going to different events on campus or servant projects, volunteering at pregnancy centers, or going to pray outside of abortion clinics. Whether you're doing this as an individual or with your friends or with a team on campus, these are all great ways to affirm life in all these different ways. Of course, you just want to be clear about what you believe and focus on the gospel, so that loving all life aspect and being open to honest conversations. So if you're going to put yourself out there and say something in class or say something to your friend group, knowing that not everyone there agrees with you, be open to have that conversation and know that, again, you have the truth of scripture on your side, you have the truth of science on your side, you have a lot going for you being a member of the For Life movement. But being able to be relational and have conversations is how you win those people and not just those arguments. Educating yourself is a great way. So engaging online through things like Chats for Life, signing up for the Equal Rights Institute, and all these different ways to educate yourself and engage in For Life conversation online is a great way to get involved, even if you don't necessarily have that team or core group of friends to do For Life activities with you. And then just really everything else is the idea of taking opportunities to volunteer and connecting to your passions. So whether that's, you're volunteering at a pregnancy clinic that's a little bit closer to the, high tense topic of abortion, or maybe you're volunteering at a homeless shelter or a soup kitchen, and you're affirming life in that way by supporting people who are in negative circumstances that people might devalue their life because of those negative circumstances. But you're taking a stand and saying, I care enough that I'm going to go serve this person who is my neighbor. And that's true for all different life issues, whether that be, serving refugees with a local organization or other immigrants. Maybe you're helping with, different clinics around campus that are educating people on life issues, even if those issues aren't necessarily like bullseye issues, is a term that we use, like abortion or euthanasia. You're still finding a really great way to connect with individuals and educate others, and then also just be a part of the For Life movement in a very active way.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Jesse. Are there any questions? Okay. So then what I want to do is give each of the different colleges an opportunity to share, maybe just to highlight what types of life ministry activities they've done, not necessarily specifics, but what life issues have they addressed. So we'll start with Hillsdale. Katie.
Okay, so my group Hillsdale has a group that's called Hillsdale College for Life. And it does engage mainly with abortion. So we do a lot of apologetics training, we do a lot of work with crisis pregnancy center. We've made blankets for them. We do a lot of apologetics training. I am also a part of a pro-life leaders training program. It's called the Scott Klusendorf program. I don't know if any of you have heard of Scott Klusendorf, but he is one of the most prolific pro-life speakers. And I've actually gotten the chance to meet him through the fellowship, which was amazing. And mainly what we do is we've read his book, which is one of the most comprehensive readings on kind of the anti-abortion argument, sorry. And then we've also read a lot of Christian leadership books. So we do a lot of personal education so that we can go out and kind of proclaim our message later. and mainly focusing on the abortion argument because, as Jesse said, that's one of the bullseye things. It's one of the bullseye issues.
Good. Nebraska. Olivia.
Yeah, so we are similarly mainly focused on the abortion issue. We've done a whole bunch of different activities and events related to it. We do 40 Days for Life, both semesters. We go to the pregnancy, or not the pregnancy center, the Planned Parenthood in Lincoln. There is a crisis pregnancy center right across the street from there now. And we've also done tie blankets for them. We do a lot of on-campus public displays. We just had our cross display that we did. We have that up for a week. And we've done some more like informative educational displays, like on having people guess when the fetal heartbeat begins, or yeah, different, like Students for Life has a lot of resources where you can have educational displays on your campus. I mentioned earlier, we usually try to go to the March for Life in DC and the Walk for Life in Lincoln. So usually you'll probably have like a local walk or March for Life that you can get your group involved in. It's different conferences. So yeah, we're mainly focused on the abortion issue, but we're going to try and get involved with the Human Trafficking Club on our campus next year, and maybe some of the mental health people on campus too.
So Olivia, will you be president next year?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, congratulations, by the
Thank
way.
you.
So that's great. Okay, so then next we want to talk to Wisconsin.
Yeah, so Caroline and I, like we said, lead CUW's group. And I don't know if this is unique to CUW, but we sort of are in an interesting position as a pro-life group because we are one of the campus ministries. So we're like specifically tied to, I guess, the Christian or like Lutheran, like our Lutheran ministries on campus. So we shy away, or at least we have shied away from like direct apologetics or like tabling on campus, that kind of thing. So what we normally do is we do like education of our group and then also service. So I'm just going to talk quickly about the service part or the education part, and Caroline will talk about service. So what we do is we have like monthly meetings just to kind of basically keep our group in the loop on like what's going on. So we'll either educate them on like what's going on in the life issues world right now, or pick at like a certain topic. So I would say we do focus probably primarily on abortion, but we definitely also talk, I think, a lot about end of life issues, and just sort of we connect through like, if you ever lead, any of you other people ever lead a Students for Life group, like definitely reach out to your resources like Students for Life of America, Y for Life, obviously. And then like a lot of times there'll be like a state group. So we use Wisconsin Right to Life, and they're awesome. Like they give we apply for grants to that from them, and they have lists of speakers that like will come and speak to your campus for free. Like they just want to do it. So anyway, we do a lot of inviting speakers to come, and sometimes we have the budget for it and sometimes we find them for free, but just to have us be educated on different life issues and how to talk about them. And then like Caroline mentioned, we this past year went through the Equal Rights Institute course, which again was awesome.
Being in like Milwaukee area, we have like the unique opportunity of like volunteering with a Lutheran pregnancy crisis home. And so that's called a place of refuge. So we'll go over there and do like cleanup at the house or like yard work kind of stuff. Sometimes we provide childcare for the moms. If they need a little break, we'll babysit, which is super fun. And we throw a baby shower for them every year. And so just like they send in some items that they would like. And so we collect those and then bring them over to the house. And typically we have the baby shower in person. This year it was on Zoom, but that's always definitely a highlight. And then we also volunteer a lot at a store called Blessed Again. And so Blessed Again is a secondhand store that is run by basically all volunteers, and all of the proceeds from Blessed Again go to a place of refuge.
All right, thank you very much. And finally, we're going to talk to Concordia Chicago.
Yeah, so we're a little bit of a wild card. So we're in one of those situations where, because we are in the Chicagoland area, we do have a lot of people on campus who aren't necessarily very pro-life. So we cover a wide variety of issues to kind of engage in life issue conversation without necessarily causing a lot of conflict. And then we're slowly working our way in. And Nicole, if you want to talk about that some more.
Yeah, so as we've kind of talked about before, and Jesse just said, we look at broader areas to find that common ground. Even though we're Lutheran campus, we're right by Chicago, and that is not a very Lutheran area. So some of our events do directly tie to abortion, and that's very visible. So we've worked with the Crisis Pregnancy Center and done a baby shower, the March for Life, and we've also looked at Down syndrome. And then some of our other broader events, we've looked at the refugee crisis because that's a big deal for the Chicago area. That's something that everybody can get behind. That was a cool event because we had people we didn't know coming to that event, so we got to do outreach that way. And then we've also addressed the human trafficking crisis, domestic violence, mental health. We've done a church worker self-care event with our spiritual life director coordinator. And then we also have a group on campus, or another ministry team that looks at homelessness. So sometimes we partner up with them and do events with them and just stuff like that. So we're kind of in the same boat as Wisconsin, where we are a spiritual life team. So we have to be a little bit careful in how we do our events. So most of them are service and education based.
All right. Any questions you guys have for them? Go ahead, Maggie.
Okay, so I'm not quite sure how to word this, but is there certain ways that the issue of, I don't know, like a homosexuality like outreach thing or whatever, like is that a conversation that happens with life groups in college, or is it just kind of something that like, oh, is acknowledged as this and this, but just like kind of gets brushed off?
So I'll go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So that's something that obviously, like, it is a life issue because marriage and family are really important to the whole context of life issues. It's how God ordained for, the reproduction and creation of life through sex within marriage. So obviously homosexuality is deviating from that, but it is a really hard topic to address because in a way, for us to make that statement, we alienate a large population on our campus who, while we do have people who are homosexuals on our campus, as well as people who would identify as allies. So it has been something that we've talked about before in kind of indirect ways. During Life Week, we used some of Lutherans for Life's materials that were published for Life Week back in January, and that did address it. But of course, the overall message was still that we love our neighbor first and foremost, regardless of their personal lifestyle and behavior. So it is really tough on a college campus because you do have such a mixed bag of people coming from all different walks of life, even on a Concordia campus. And in a way, when you have these life or death issues like abortion and then human trafficking, euthanasia, physician-assisted suicide, all these different areas, you kind of have to pick your battles in a way of, do I want to alienate this portion of campus and then lose the chance to talk to them about these more life or death issues? Or do I want to stay away from that and keep them tied into, helping us serve the homeless population in our area, or helping us, minister to the refugee population in our area? So for us, it's something that we've avoided just because we don't want to alienate people. Of course, we wouldn't like lie or anything about what we believe, but it's not something that we've explicitly addressed because we know that this population would not necessarily react well to that. And we'd rather be able to minister to them and not create that barrier right away when we have so many more opportunities to actually save lives by addressing these closer to the bullseye target issues.
Yeah, go ahead, Bonnie.
I would just add to that. I think it's kind of the same on any campus, just because no matter your location, just because of where pop culture is on homosexuality right now, is like, if you were to say something negative about that, it's just like automatically you are a bad person and they will not talk to you. So I would totally agree with you, Jesse. Like, it's not, and I actually really haven't even thought about, interestingly, like, I mean, we had Michelle actually on campus come and talk about love last year, and marriage, but it's not, yeah, it's not like that you're trying to hide it or that you wouldn't talk about it. But if our groups could be branded as like the anti-gay club or something, which can just happen so fast, you kind of run that risk. And I would say if you were to bring it up, it definitely would have to be one sort of something that you bring up later as you like build a relationship with someone, and like somebody who isn't, you'd want to sort of work on like the bigger issues first. So like, can we talk about whether you're pro-life or not, or what your stance on human trafficking is, kind of like working on those bigger issues. And then once a person has come along sort of a ways, then you could sort of talk about that issue. And I think it would have to be framed not as like, so I think homosexuality is a sin, but rather like, what do you think about marriage? What do you believe marriage is? And like, how do you view children and all that? Because really the most compelling reason, because if people think abortion is oppressive, or illegalizing abortion is oppressive, telling people that they can't marry who they want to marry when it doesn't harm anyone, kind of thing, can be perceived as way more oppressive. So you really have to come at it from like, what do you think about marriage, and kind of like teaching them from the Bible what marriage is, so that they could see why we have a problem with homosexuality, instead of just being like, well, we just think that it's bad and everybody who's gay is bad, kind of thing, because it's so easy to broad brush people like that. So.
And just going off of what you said, Bonnie, with like approaching it from the positive side of marriage, Pastor Salaming is the executive director of Lutherans for Life, and he gives a phenomenal presentation on homosexuality that I've seen multiple times, and I want so badly to bring to our campus, but I don't know that it's ready for that. But the biggest point is, don't focus on what you're trying to take away from them, focus on what they're missing. And what they're missing is God's perfect design. Obviously, right. That design is broken in our sinful world, but there's so much beauty to be seen in a marriage between one man and one woman for the creation of a family. And we see that in scripture, in the parallelism between our relationship with Christ and the church, and then our adoption as children of God, and all these different family aspects that are part of that perfect design that God had for us when he created this world. And so focusing on that and what they're missing, versus what you're trying to take away, is so much more powerful. And that goes for all life issues. You're not trying to take away someone's right to an abortion. You're trying to show them the joy of life that they're missing by not valuing the child that they have been blessed with to carry if they're the woman, or to care for if they're the father. So showing them what they're missing and the joy that's to be found in all these life issues is so much more powerful and so much more effective than focusing on trying to take things away, quote unquote, because that's how people want to see it. But the truth is, you're trying to show them the joy of what they're missing.
And Maggie, it is an excellent question to ask, because that is probably the primary, honestly, what the culture is saying to young people today is that you are a sexual being, and that's it, right? Satisfying those sexual needs is of utmost importance, and that is the picture of you, right? You are your gender or your sex, and so it does have to be addressed. It does. But it can be addressed in ways that are positive, like Bonnie and Jesse have both said, bringing in someone to talk about marriage, or talking about it one-on-one. Even if you don't want to make it a big event, it's good to know how to have the conversation and to have the resources to talk about it, to know why is marriage a blessing, right? When we love someone, we want what's best for them, and God's way is always the best way. Right. And so figuring out why God's way is the best way. What is it? What gifts does he give in marriage that are different from someone who's choosing to live outside of, or even just in growing up as the gender that God has created you, right? Someone who's chosen to live outside of that is missing out on those gifts, right? And because we love them, we want them to have those gifts as well. But again, you do have to be careful, because again, people are going to hear the message that they want to hear in that conversation. And so I think that is much better done one-on-one, and done through gifts like marriage and family and what is real love, and that opens the conversation. So does that answer your question, Maggie? You're going to run into it no matter what Concordia you go to, or I know you're planning on going to Concordia, right? It's going to be on campus. It was one of the things when I was a high school teacher I used to talk to my students about a lot. Remember who you are, right? And surround yourself with people who remind you of your identity in Christ, who remind you of who you are made to be, because the college campus will challenge that again and again and again. So, okay, final comments, final questions. You've had some good ones. Jenna.
I'm curious to see what the different life groups and things. Do you guys think they have do you think they pick sort of between, do they prioritize sort of on-campus work and things, or do they do a lot of outreach in the community the college is in, or do you think there's a good mix? And just your opinions on if you think there's like a good time to focus on one of the other, or do you usually take it as a case-by-case scenario, sort of?
Okay, great question. Katie?
I would say that since I go to a very Christian conservative college, a lot of what my group has struggled to do is find a way to advocate to a pro-life population, to an already pro-life population. It kind of feels like we're preaching to the choir. And so we do a lot of outreach in the community. We've been to Lansing several times, to Michigan State to do some outreach. So what we do at my college is mainly educating ourselves on the issues, on how to address them to people who may not have the same perspective as us. And just kind of, we're in a bubble, and we just learn how to take our message out of the bubble to the rest of the world.
Go ahead, Olivia.
I would say it is kind of a case-by-case thing. You have to observe what your specific campus community is like. And I think there's ways that you can be involved both on campus and outside. I think that our group has a good mix of both. I mean, one of the things that might occur more on a Christian conservative campus that's pro-life is more young couples having children. So that provides an opportunity for outreach. So like our group has done baby registries for couples on campus that have had kids, or we also me and some of my other friends have helped like babysit for parenting people on campus. So there's that way that you could get involved in your specific campus community as like a direct servant outreach. And then also through like crisis pregnancy centers that might be more out in the city, depending on where your college is at.
Thanks, guys, again for coming, and we'll see you hopefully next Thursday.
Thank you.
Thank you to all the presenters. Wonderful job.
Thanks for joining us for today's life topic. Check out whyforlife.org or email Michelle at whyforlife.org to find out how and when you can go live with us at our next Chats for Life session. Or join us next time right here at Why for Life Podcasts, where youth learn how to be gospel-motivated voices for life.